One of the biggest experiments in the upcoming draft cycles, not just for this year but for years to come it seems, is the overtime elites. So now that we have their first class, now that we've been able to watch a couple of games, let's get into them. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break them down.
Let's start with Ausar Thompson, a 6'7" wing that's already becoming one of my favorite prospects in 2023. There is a chance that Thompson will be draft available in 2022, but that's still to be determined, so let's focus on what he has shown so far. To me, Thompson projects as an impactful two-way player with his athleticism, defensive motor, and developing offensive game. But everything begins with his defense, where Thompson has arguably stood out as OTE's best prospect on this end of the floor. With his 6'10" wingspan and relentless intensity, Thompson is already a switchable defender that can equally pick up wings or defend at the point of attack. He's looked comfortable picking up guards at half court and hounding them with a level of engagement that is unusual at the high school age. Something that is very important with Thompson is that he understands how to use his length. Thompson is lean, long, and lanky. He could still stand to get stronger, and I'm sure that he will, but what you cannot teach are these instincts. Just watch time and time again as Thompson comes up with some hugely impressive blocks. As of today, Real GM has Thompson averaging 5 rejections per game in OTE action so far. Safe to say, that's an impressive figure. One could argue that the level of competition OTE has faced so far leaves a bit to be desired. I agree, but I'm also choosing to focus on Thompson's feel and energy. The only noticeable improvement area for Thompson until now is that he can be too handsy on defense. To be clear, that is not a bad thing. However, Thompson will learn in time how to choose his spots better, and also just how to be more clever with his long arms. Offensively, the reading on Thompson has been mostly positive, although I want to see him in more challenging environments. He is still developing as a shooter in my opinion, but the flashes are very encouraging. Thompson is a comfortable, willing shooter, especially from the mid-range. He can attack closeouts, create a bit for himself out of ball screens, and has a budding pull-up game. If I had to make a comparison, Thompson reminds me a little bit of DeAndre Hunter. In terms of stretching the floor, Thompson can still become a more willing three-point shooter. Right now, he mostly operates in the mid-range, which is a privilege few NBA players get. He only shoots 3 triples per game. However, he is making them at a 44% clip so far. He has fluid mechanics even though his lower body moves a bit too much, and he has shown that he can move and rise into threes. Still, Thompson has to improve his consistency as a pull-up shooter. The numbers do not necessarily reflect that right now, 17 points per game, 50% from the field, but also keep in mind that a lot of these buckets are in transition or in the paint. I will get into that in a few moments, however, I'm optimistic in the long run about Thompson's potential as a shooter. Like I said though, Thompson is really good in the open court right now. OTE plays at a high pace already, but the competition they've faced has also been worse than them. That means that misses lead to transition opportunities, and Thompson has capitalized on those in a big way. Thompson is incredibly fluid running the floor with his long strides and ability to get up in the air. He is a true menace in transition. Thompson is really good at running, catching, and finishing. That fits the modern NBA really well, and it's easy to imagine Thompson leaking out and getting rewarded on a team that plays really fast, such as the Charlotte Hornets. But I will say that Thompson's footwork can still improve. There are instances where Thompson will get the ball in the open court and then sort of close off his own angle to the rim. Thompson largely wants to take it right and does not appear totally comfortable going both ways at the rim. Again, he has time to improve this, but it's something that I want to see him get better at. Up next, we go to 6'2" guard Bryce Griggs. I have to admit that I was unsure about Griggs at first, but I think that what sets him apart is his feel for the game. In my opinion, Griggs has the means to be an excellent passer. He plays with his head up and is really clever at finding three-point shooters. That skill set would only be more valuable at a higher level given the improved shooting. Griggs reminds me of Sharif Cooper and how he is able to easily get both feet into the paint and then make a decision from there. Griggs is a blur when he gets downhill, even considering that he can still get leaner and stronger. Watch this pass here, as Griggs enters the paint and then fires it off from a tough angle for the tray. Griggs is averaging 7 assists per game for OTE so far, but one could argue that number should be even higher. Also, the Houston-born guard is posting a 3-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. That is exactly what you want in your point guard, someone who can set others up while not really turning the ball over. Another type of pass that Griggs excels at is dishing off the ball on the move. This is key for him because, like I said, he's pretty much getting into the paint whenever he wants. If Griggs gets there and can operate off a live dribble, which he can, then everything becomes a lot faster and sharper. Griggs is an all-around passing threat, and I think it's a shame that this part of his game goes by underrated, sort of because of this mixtape culture that OTE takes advantage of. Either way, when Griggs gets deep into the opposing half, he does not just kick it out for three. Griggs is equally adept at finding cutters, bigs, or simply players on the interior. All this time I've been stressing the advantages Griggs generates getting downhill. Well, they also apply to some of his scoring. If you give Griggs the lane, then he will attack the basket. I see some shades of Jalen Suggs in how Griggs can come up with acrobatic and creative finishes, but I cannot really invest into that comparison too much because the context for Griggs is so different. Much like Thompson, Griggs has thrived in transition for OTE. The caveat here is that I'm less sure about how this will fit in the NBA. Don't get me wrong, Griggs is a good athlete when it comes to accelerating and decelerating. He's also fairly strong for his age, but like I mentioned, there's still room for his body to improve. Griggs lacks that extra pop at the rim, and he has not shown too much of an in-between game to offset this improvement area. Looking at the rest of his offensive game, pull-up shooting is definitely the biggest improvement area for Griggs. Griggs is a volume shot taker for sure, but he is not yet a reliable shot maker. According to Real GM, Griggs is shooting 39% from the field and 31% from three. It starts with his shot mechanics. Griggs has a funky, low release that, to me at least, seems like it is tough to pull up into. It is slow, it is easy to disrupt, and it is hard for Griggs to get it off. Additionally, Griggs must also get better at creating separation for himself when he wants to shoot the ball. The shot in particular will be important for Griggs, especially for his NBA aspirations. 6'2" point guards who cannot shoot have a tough time staying in the league. And regardless of that, if defenses are willing to let Griggs shoot, then that closes off the lanes and prevents him from doing what he is best at. Defensively, there isn't much to go into other than that Griggs needs to improve across the board. He lacks engagement and discipline. You will rarely see him bend his knees, get his hips low, and enter a stance. Instead, you'll mostly see Griggs upright, which makes him prone to fouls, sloppiness, late reactions, etc. That is not someone that you can trust on defense. I really like parts of Griggs' offensive game, but he will need to at least show some willingness to do the dirty work on defense going forward. Finally, we've got 16-year-old big Jalen Lewis, the youngest pro in American basketball history. Lewis is not draft eligible until 2024, but I want to quickly touch on him because it is clear that OTE is pretty invested in him. Let's start with the good, and those are the glimpses that Lewis has shown of being an all-around, versatile big. If all Lewis has to do is run, catch, and finish, then he is already fairly good at this. I really like how hard Lewis has run the floor in his first few OTE games. He can outspeed his opponents from one end of the court to the other and pick up easy points that way. Lewis has also shown some glimpses of having a jumper. He is pretty fluid for a 16-year-old big and should only get better. Even though he took just to a game, Lewis made 58% of his threes at the FIBA Under-16 Americas Championship. He's also made 9 of his 11 free throws for OTE. That indicates to me that Lewis has some shooting potential, which, like I've said previously, is important for NBA bigs nowadays. Lewis will cement himself as arguably the best big in his draft class if he can supplement this skill set with passing and rebounding, but he is still very green, and it is obvious. For example, Lewis cannot be trusted at all right now to handle the ball. His handle is loose, high, and just not functional really. He has also not been much of a passer with OTE, posting just 2 assists in the 3 games Real GM has tracked. He has turned the ball over 4 times. That means that you need Lewis to be a shot maker or a scorer, but he really lacks consistency in this area. The potential is still there, but Lewis has made under 30% of his field goals in an OTE uniform. He can rush his own shot, get sped up by the defense, and his jumper does not always look the same. These things are normal for a 16-year-old, but it's worth pointing them out now so that we can see how Lewis develops. Finally, Lewis can be too soft. Even though he is 6'9" and 215 pounds, Lewis does not physically overwhelm his defenders. He would rather fade away than go up strong, such as in this clip. Down the line, he will need to embrace being physical to maximize his potential. This lack of toughness also shows up on the glass. Lewis is not really a tenacious rebounder, and he does not have magnets for hands. And on defense, Lewis is too undisciplined. After my comments on Griggs and now this, it might seem like OTE does not care about D, but I would argue that is inaccurate. There are players who put in real two-way shifts. It just so happens that Lewis is not one of them. The package and tools are there for him to be an impactful defender. However, he really lacks engagement on this side of the ball. It can seem like Lewis thinks he'll get stops simply by being one of the biggest guys on the floor. Lewis needs to play with more poise and not just have his arms flying around everywhere.
First things first, I have to say that from what I have seen so far, Overtime Elite is a very, very serious project. And I appreciate that. You know, we don't just have guys running up and down the floor without making sense of what they do. They don't just go from one end to the other, just jacking up threes just because, you know, they have the skill set to do it and now they're being paid big money to do it. It hasn't been like that. I've appreciated that, you know, there are semblances of an NBA offense, heavy in the pick and roll, heavy in the pace and space, and I appreciate that. Are there still things that need to be ironed out? I mean, sure, absolutely, but that's probably going to be the case, I would say, for at least the first season of Overtime Elite. Now, onto the names, and I think just from the video right off the bat, I think it's very clear who I am most impressed by. And yes, that is number 0, Ausar Thompson. But Thompson has been incredibly good for the Overtime Elite so far, on both ends of the floor. The first time I watched him, I was already very impressed by his defense, which was mature, not just by his, you know, the Overtime Elite standard, which I guess would be probably the AAU or high school standard, but I think, you know, by college basketball standards, really, or by any standard of quality that you would judge a legit NBA prospect off. And I think Thompson has been super impressive. He's all over the place with his length. He knows how to use it. You know, he can pick up steals. He can get blocks coming in from the weak side, leaping up high above the rim. And then he can also hold his own on the perimeter, be it against guards or be it against wings. But his overall size, his blend of athleticism and scoring, and, you know, just how he gets up and down the floor and he's able to move and check so many different positions, I find that incredibly impressive already. Up next, we've got Bryce Griggs, and to be honest, I'm still sort of feeling him out. I think, first of all, the offensive potential is there on a few levels. First of all, the one thing that I like about Griggs a lot is how easily he can get into the paint. He is super explosive, and in my opinion, he still has work to do on his body to become even leaner and stronger. So once that catches up to how he already plays, I think he can be one of those guys that, even though he is not necessarily a big-time shooter, just the fact that he puts so much pressure going to the rim, attacking the basket, and then from there he can make the right passes. You know, he can dish it out to the three-point line. He can find his bigs under the basket. And I think all of those things are incredibly valuable to have. Now with Griggs, the question marks are not just his shot, which, you know, the release is a little low. He's already not the biggest guy. It's unconventional to say the least, so I do think that will need some changing, but also on the defensive end of the basketball. Right now, I think it kind of goes back to what I said about him needing to get in better shape or still being able to get in better shape. But right now, Griggs is just all the time too upright, you know, doesn't get down in a stance, just lazy, you know, his hands are not active, you know, they're in the play, but he'll be fouling people. So he really needs to get better at that, just becoming more disciplined and being able to have that motor on both ends of the floor. One guy that stood out to me was Jalen Lewis. And Lewis, you know, he comes into the Overtime Elite program, I believe as of right now, he is the youngest pro, at least in the United States. You know, Lewis has, I guess, what you would call a pretty appealing package of size, athleticism, definitely youthfulness. I mean, that's probably what he has going the most for him right now. And he's shown some flashes of shooting, some rim protection here and there. The thing for me with Lewis is that, all right, I'm seeing all the tools, I'm seeing the package, not just, you know, physically, because he is pretty big already, but in terms of, you know, what he can do on the court. However, he is still just so raw right now. He is really, really raw. You know, you'll see him have nights where, okay, he'll come out one half or one quarter, he'll shoot the ball really well, and then for the rest of the game, just shoot it terribly. So he's lacking consistency in that area. He needs to get tougher for sure. You know, he's got to get his hands on rebounds. He's got to go up strong. He cannot be afraid to take contact, either, you know, as a defender or an attacker. He's got to be able to do that on both sides of the basketball. But again, you know, he is still so young. You know, it's clear that the Overtime Elite program has a lot invested in him, and I think rightfully so. It's going to take a little while for everything to come together, but if it does, then, you know, he's going to be one of the best big man prospects in the years to come. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. Make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Overtime Elite. You know, are you following the league? Are you going to be keeping an eye on these guys? Let me know about that. And as always, if you enjoy the channel, if you enjoyed the video, if you want to see more content like this, make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to comment. You already know what to do. Follow me on Twitter, run everything up, but most of all, subscribe, leave a like, and comment, and I'll catch you guys next time.